So today we have a 2000 E350. It's actually an older U-Haul truck, and the complaint was the power steering had quit working on this vehicle. Now this vehicle isn't used a whole lot. It's basically used to transport some materials back and forth the parking lot, and on occasion it does longer trips. But during one of those short trips back and forth from the parking lot to the front doors, power steering quit running, and they gave me a call and said, "Hey, can you take a look at it? Power steering doesn't work." I said, "Okay, no problem." So I stopped by the other day to troubleshoot this and started the truck up, and sure enough, the power steering was not working. I immediately went into troubleshooting mode, and I thought, well, maybe it had a power steering pump leak and it lost its fluid. We'll check its fluid and see what's going on. So I shut off the vehicle and I got outside and took a look down inside, and what I noticed was there was no belt. The belt had actually broken off, and so I thought, all right, there must be a problem with one of the pulleys is locked up, or something is locked up, maybe the power steering pump. And so anyhow, I did find the remaining of the belt down in the bottom, which as you can see, the belt actually is relatively new. We just had a belt put on it less than a year ago, and the belt looks good, but if you inspect the end, you can tell it was a hard tear. This wasn't a rotted belt, it actually tore hard, so obviously something happened other than old belt or belt wear or belt rot. And digging around and reaching in around the engine cavity, what I found out was the alternator is completely locked up. So we're going to take a look at that. Now, the good thing about getting to the alternator on these vehicles is basically you remove this, no bolts needed, just unbuckle the strap and pop the whole thing out, your air cleaner box, and you can get right to the alternator. So immediately my eyes are drawn to a few things. Number one is it is cracked right here. Number two, there's an awful lot of belt material stuck in the groove, so this thing is pretty much stopped and seized up, and the belt has melded itself to it, and you cannot turn the pulley at all with your hands. So the alternator's bad. It's going to need pulled and replaced, and as you can see, it's really not too difficult on this particular setup. I know it's a van front end. Everybody hates van front ends, including me. But once you pull this box out, since the air, this thing's sitting pretty much right on top, you got to get to the bolts on the bottom, and there's one in the back. Unplug everything and just pull it out and replace it. So let's do that. Now, unlike some of you folks out there that like to do all this hot swap, I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to actually pull the hot cable off the battery. That way the entire system is safe to work on. If I accidentally short something out, it's no big deal because, well, the battery is going to be disconnected. Now, one quick tip is there is enough room, ironically, in this small enclosure that you can unbolt the alternator with those 3 bolts that we talked about, and you can spin it around inside the engine cavity and then get the cables off. It's kind of hard to reach behind there and get the cables off when the alternator is facing its regular installed direction, but once you flip it around like this, as you can see, it's pretty easy to work with the plugs and undo the main bolt there and pull off the cables. Putting the new alternator in is just as simple as taking the old one out. It's just the 2 bolts on the bottom, and then there's a bolt back here. It's kind of hard to see. Pretty simple. I did notice that the newer alternator kind of had a different design on where the lug goes on. The other alternator, the lug actually bolted to the back. This kind of has a sideways extension. Don't really know if that's good or bad, but the story on the alternator was typically I will have mine rebuilt. There's a local guy that rebuilds them fairly inexpensively, and his stuff holds up pretty well. However, this particular customer needed this by Monday, which this is Sunday, so I didn't really have time to take it down to my friend to have him rewrap it, so I went to the local auto store, and within talking to him, he said, "Hey," he said, "I'm going to let you know." He goes, "The in-house reman ones that we have, the remanufactured ones, seem to have some issues." He goes, "I highly suggest you buy a new one." He goes, "They come with a lifetime warranty," and quite honestly, it wasn't that much more. So I did go ahead and put a brand new alternator on this vehicle, only because that's what the salesman behind the counter said. And quite honestly, I see him a lot, and I'm in that store a lot, and typically what he says is pretty spot on. So this case, we got a new one. So now it's just a matter of putting the belt on and firing this thing up, and she should be good to go. So now that the battery cables are hooked back up, I went ahead and started it. Everything seems to run fine. The dash voltage meter is now working, showing a charging voltage. You could put a meter on it and take a closer look at it, but I'm actually not going to worry about this. This van needs to be operational by tomorrow, and I think it's going to be just fine. And pretty easy, about a half an hour worth of work maybe, pulling the alternator, and maybe another half an hour putting it back in. Probably less time if you're familiar with it and you have all the right tools ready. And quite honestly, a cheap ratchet set is all I use for this entire alternator change, so it doesn't take a lot of tools either. Pretty simple. And if you like these do-it-yourself types of videos, sometimes I sneak a vehicle repair in, sometimes I just make stuff. Take a look at my other videos. You might like what you see, and please like and subscribe.